Well, Stephen Kajiura, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to do this. It's a funny coincidence that we're doing this today, September 2nd, because exactly a year ago, September 2nd, 2024, I was a shark survivor in Miami. Me and my friend, we got chased by a shark and we survived. We made it out. So I think it's a funny coincidence that we're doing this today.
Wow, what this is news. This is exciting. Um,
Yeah.
do you know what it was? What kind of shark it was?
When I tell the story to people, I try to hype it up like it was a great white or something, but from what I've heard, it was just a nurse shark. So
Uh-huh.
maybe not as dangerous, but
Yeah.
it was after us. So
Yeah.
that's something.
What were you doing to the shark
Um,
to
you
attract
know,
it?
yeah, it was South Miami Beach, and
Uh-huh.
I love swimming, but every time I go to the beach, my mom and my grandma, they stop me from going too far out.
Mhm.
But on this trip, it was a bachelor's trip, there was nobody to stop me. So I just kept going and going, and I made it really far out. And I noticed, to my right and to my left, there's nobody. I'm really far out here. And then my friend joins me, and we're just chilling in the water. And then all of a sudden, we hear the lifeguard blow the whistle, and everybody's rushing out. And I jokingly say to him, "Hey, man, it's probably a shark." But I was kidding. And we're slowly making our way back, and lo and behold, it really was a shark. And so, we swam for our lives. We're the only ones in the water at that time. And yeah, crazy story, crazy story. But
Wow.
what's even more interesting about that story is I was just in a phase of my life where I was so fascinated with sharks
Hmm.
prior to that trip. And I remember my dad telling me, we're not on the menu.
Yeah.
When they interact with humans, it's more out of curiosity than it is anything else.
So this is the your dad's right, of course, humans are not a regular part of what the sharks are eating, but the difficulty is that when they are curious, they don't have hands. They can't pick you up and figure out what you are. They have to investigate with something, and that's their mouth. And they'll take a little bite, take a nibble, see what you are, and they'll quickly decide, yeah, you taste horrible. You don't taste at all like a fish or whatever they're after. Um, but at that point, the damage is done. Those little nibbles with those rows and rows of sharp teeth do a lot of tissue damage anyway. So it may be that they're not out to get you, and they are maybe curious or mistaken identity. That's the other thing. They think that you're splashing around in the water and you look like, the palm of your hand can like catch the light and look like a shiny fish for a second, right? And as a result of that, they may zip up and go chomp and say, "Oh, no, you're not at all a fish," and let you go. But by then, your hand is all, chewed up and bleeding. So you still have the wounds, even though it was a quick, a mere second of encounter. It may not be much in terms of time, but that's the damage that they can do with their teeth. So you're right. Your dad's right. They're not out to get you, but when they do investigate, well, that's how tragedies happen.
Have you ever had a close call with one of these investigations? What's your most dangerous shark story?
I tell people that I've been bitten by dead sharks far more often than live sharks. And if we're out there, um, if I'm in the lab, for example, I'm doing like a jaw prep or something from a shark, and it'll snap closed in my finger, and I'll get bitten that way accidentally from this set of jaws that I'm working with. That has happened more often than I care to admit, and it's basically just slippery tissue and slipping in your hand and cutting you. But it's indicative of number one how sharp these teeth are. Just handling them and just having them, slip or fall and hit your finger is enough to draw blood. And it's also a reminder that when they do want to bite, if they do damage, they can do a heck of a lot of damage. And so most people are bitten, it's a relatively small bite. For the vast majority of shark bites are just a quick bite and let go, bite and release. There are very few where the shark will bite repeatedly or, kill the person. But that does happen on occasion. When we have been bitten by live sharks, it's due to our own hubris. I think, oh, it's a little baby shark. I just grab it and take the hook out of the mouth with my bare hands instead of using pliers, right? And that's how I've been bitten twice in my life, twice. Both times because I said, oh, it's a little shark. I just grab the hook. Even little sharks have very sharp teeth, little razor blades. And so I remember the one time I was bitten, the little baby hammerhead was maybe what, a foot and a half long, little thing like
Wow.
this. And I just went to grab it and said, oh, take it out. And as I was doing that, it just snapped its head to the side. And so fast, the teeth just dragged across my fingers. And I didn't even know I was cut at first. When I pulled the hook out and I looked down at my hand, I saw this series of like three or four beautiful little parallel lines on
Hmm.
my finger where I had, just reached to grab it and it caught me. Um, and I thought, wow, that is a tiny shark. But man, those teeth were like razors. I didn't even feel them going through the skin until I saw the blood. So it
Wow.
doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it's usually our own fault.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. What is it that got you so interested in sharks? How did this fascination begin for you?
I don't know. I just don't know. Ever since I was a little kid, I remember being like, 4 years old, 5 years old, and getting books from the library about ocean life and whatever else, and was always fascinated. And sharks in particular, I thought were so cool for whatever reason. Little kids like everything, right? But I just never outgrew it. I just always thought sharks were cool. And I just maintained that and have managed to make a career out of something that you know, uh, loved to do when I was a little kid. And that's look at pictures of sharks and then study sharks and learn what I can about them. And now I'm doing the exact same thing. So I'm delighted to be doing my childhood dream of following the path of being a marine biologist, and I actually did it. So I'm very fortunate, and I consider myself very fortunate that I've been able to do exactly what I've wanted to do since I was a little kid.
Yeah, that is so cool. And on throughout your journey, were there ever any moments where you felt like you were deterred from doing this and then you came back, or no, it was just always a straight shot?
No, it's pretty much a straight shot. I remember, growing up where I grew up, it was Southern Ontario, Canada.
Oh,
It's this
wow.
small rural farming community. Um, no one does things like marine biology. And so when I said, to my parents in high school, I said, yeah, I want to go to college for marine biology. It was met with a lot of skepticism, not just by my parents, but other people who said, Marine, it's not even a real job, marine biologist. What are you going to do? What kind of job are you going to get doing that? Um, but, my parents were very supportive and said, all right, well, if that's what you want to do, go do that. You can figure it out later. And so I did. Right from high school, I went right into marine biology as an undergraduate. I had never even seen the ocean but I knew that's what I wanted to do. It wasn't until I was an undergraduate that I actually saw the ocean for the first time. Um, and so I always wanted to do it, and I did my undergraduate, and then I did my graduate work, and ended up here as a faculty member doing exactly what I wanted to do. So it's been a pretty much a straight shot, And I remember when I started, I knew that getting into the field of shark biology was very competitive. A lot of people want to do it. Not a lot
Mhm.
of labs have the capacity to host students, and so I was very fortunate to be able to get into a marine bio lab that actually did shark work. And so I consider that was a good, a great opportunity. And it's something that I've always carried forward. You know, as I have my own lab now, what I want to do is I want to provide to students the opportunities that I wish I had had when I was a student. So, when I was an undergrad, I wish I'd had the opportunity to go out shark fishing and tag sharks or whatever, right? And so if I can provide students now, my students now with those opportunities, I'm delighted to do it. I consider myself very fortunate, and I want to be able to do the same thing for my students. Everything that I wish I had done back then as well.
Huh, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That being said, how often are you operating in the actual oceans?
Yeah. So
How
we
often do
try
you
and
get?
get a yeah. So it's a good question because when you're posting social media content or writing, what people notice are the pictures of you out in the field working with the sharks, and they don't see the hours and hours of you sitting, behind the computer crunching data or whatever, the far less glamorous part. But for the work that we do, we try and get out on the water at least every couple of weeks. We have long-term monitoring projects where like to sample a couple of times a month at least. And then in the certain times of the year, so the spring, for example, down here in South Florida, we have this annual migration of sharks that come down here. And we get out quite often then to take advantage of these brief windows on a couple of months when they're here in large numbers. But we have a lot of work to do in those couple of months to get these projects done. So at that point, we're out there, maybe a couple of times a week for a few months, working very hard. And then the rest of the year, it's down to, a couple times a month to continue the long-term monitoring. But it's the fun days on the water that really is what we remember, what we think back on. We don't remember the days sitting in front of the computer crunching data. Those will blur together. But the fun times on the water is what really gets us going.
Yeah. I imagine you've sailed the seven seas. Where is it in the world where you're like, man, this is the most beautiful place for sharks and just in general?
I distinctly remember living in Hawaii when I was doing my PhD. I was doing it at University of Hawaii and living there and saying, I am never going to have an opportunity to live in this sort of place again. This is gorgeous. And so I took time every week to do something fun. I'd take one day and I'd go diving or hiking or something fun. And I would call it my one guilt-free non-work day to take advantage of my environment because I loved being in Hawaii. So that to me was the greatest, probably the nicest place I've lived in terms of access to the natural world. From the mountains down to the ocean and then everything underwater as well. It was really very pretty, and I'd go back in a heartbeat if I could.
Yeah. I've always been curious about sharks and mythologies and cultures around the world. Do sharks play a big role in Hawaiian culture? Do you know anything
Yeah,
about that?
yeah, definitely. Sharks are a big part of the native Hawaiian culture. A lot of the native culture is built on the acknowledgement of the ancestors, and they will call the some of the sharks their aumakua, their guardian spirits, their guardian ancestors. The I guess the reincarnation or the ancestors coming back as a shark, and not in any uh, malicious way, but the sharks are viewed as the guardians in the
Hmm.
environment. And so there's a lot of respect in the Polynesian culture for these sharks, these aumakua, these ancestors. And I think that's what makes it so interesting and so cool to be out there is it's not the same fear. It's a different mindset. It's not the same fear mindset that you might have off Florida or California or something, right? It's very much a respect mindset. These are respectful guardians of the ocean, and I think that mindset makes a difference. And I think that's what made Hawaii such a cool place to be is the way the sharks were understood rather than here on the mainland.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. What was that? What was the term again for them?
Aumakua.
And that literally
Aumakua.
means guardian or what?
Yeah, it's like a guardian spirit, an ancestral guardian spirit. So your ancestor will take on the form of a shark to, in some cases.
Wow.
maybe a manta ray in other cases, maybe whatever else, a sea turtle in some cases, but the almakua was the guardian spirit.
Wow. Interesting. Very interesting stuff.
I'm sure there are much better scholars of Hawaiian mythology than me who could weigh in much more depth and probably correct my understanding, but that's the best that I understand.
No, it's all good. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. What else are you really fascinated by in the sea? I mean, of course, it's so vast, it's so big. Is there another creature in particular where, like, after the shark, this is the one that I'm really fascinated by?
There's so many cool things out there. And I remember when I was an undergraduate thinking about graduate school, thinking I'd like to work on sharks, but I know that it's hard to get into shark labs. Maybe I should have a backup. I like sea turtles. I like sea urchins. I like, whatever, as sort of backups. And having that sort of that ability to look at other things, I think is important. And what I would emphasize to students today is don't necessarily focus on a particular taxon. Don't focus just on sharks in particular. Focus on a question and then use that group as the model to answer the question. So what I mean is maybe you're interested in migration, right? That's just the whole phenomenon of moving from one place to another. And you could study migration in birds or sharks or whales or and any number of different species. You're interested in the question, and you happen to use sharks as the model to study that question. Or maybe you're interested in I don't know, animal behavior, and you could study any sort of behavior using any sort of animal model, but you're particularly interested in, you know, using sharks as the model. For me, what I thought was interesting was sensory biology, how they sense the world around them. We're accustomed to hearing and talking and tasting and touching and seeing. These are our methods of interacting and getting information from the world. Well, sharks can do all of those things, but they have a cool sense that enables them to detect electric fields in the environment. And so if a little fish, for example, you take a little flatfish, it buries under the sand and you can't smell it, you can't see it, it doesn't make any noise, you're knocking out all these senses, but it will still produce an electric field around its body just because the concentration of chemicals in the body is different than the seawater. So it sets up a voltage potential. It's like a little battery.
Hmm.
And so the sharks have their unique electric sense that enables them to detect this electric field and home in on this cryptic prey item and still find it with their electric sense and dig it up and eat it. Right. That to me was fascinating. And so that sort of led me to the idea of sensory biology being the area that I wanted to explore. And in particular, the electrosense, which could only be found in sharks, which is why I ended up studying shark electroreception for my dissertation work. So it's not necessarily I was forced to do sharks. I brought myself to sensory biology and the one particular sense that only sharks have. Oh, what a coincidence. It's electric sense. And so that allowed me to use sharks as the ultimate model to look at what I wanted to do. And I think that was a good segue because it set me up to do all sorts of other things. I can look at vision and olfaction and all these other senses as well.
Yeah, that actually reminds me. I've heard when it comes to eating a shark that it's it's difficult because of something about how they store urine and toxins in their skin. What's the science behind that?
So sharks maintain the concentration of chemicals in their body that's different than the seawater. Okay. All fishes do that. Any fish, any reef fish does that. You do it. I do it. Our internal osmotic concentration is different than the seawater. All right. Sharks do it differently than other fishes. They retain a chemical compound called urea. It's not urine. Just
Mm.
it's urea. It's a nitrogen based compound, nitrogen and hydrogen basically. And what this does is it maintains their concentration of ions in their body relatively close to the concentration that's in the seawater around them. But because they retain this urea in their body, it's heavily loaded with nitrogen, and their tissue, their muscle, their skin, everything is very ammonia-like. If you were to sample a shark, cut a shark open and sniff it. Um, don't recommend it, but if you do, you're going to get this smell of ammonia. It's because of all the nitrogen that's in there. And as a result of that, sharks are not really a good eating fish. You have to neutralize the ammonia in the tissue in order to prepare it well enough to eat. Now, a few species you can do that with, like makos. They'll eat black tips. A few of these species are not nearly as or more. Let's say it's easier to treat them. It's easier to get the ammonia out of them, and people will grill up, black tip steaks and eat those or whatever, and be happy with them. On a side note, I don't recommend it because of the heavy metal, like mercury, in the
Yes.
tissue, which is high. So I don't recommend it at all. But that's what some people will do, and that's why most sharks are not eaten for flesh because they are so nasty tasting compared to a typical reef fish that doesn't have that urea, that ammonia in its body in the same way.
Yeah, I was surprised that in Iceland they have, I mean, they have a snack, I guess, of shark where
Yeah.
it's little pieces. It kind of looks like cheese. Are you familiar with this? Have you ever tried it?
I'm I'm wondering if this is the stuff where they will take it and bury it, and basically decompose it and rot it so the tissue becomes really soft, like the consistency of cheese. That's what I'm wondering if that is. It just strikes me as disgusting. You're taking a shark and you're burying it, and then you're digging up the rotting carcass and eating that. I mean, there's much better things to eat.
Yeah, yeah. That being said, I'm also curious, just out of curiosity, is it possible to prepare a shark steak or no? That's just unreasonable. It
No, you
wouldn't
can do it.
work. Oh, you
Yeah,
can.
people do
Wow.
it.
Okay.
People eat blacktip steaks.
Mm.
Um, you can cut them thin, and I don't know exactly how to do it. I've never done it, but you can go to the grocery store and buy fresh local caught shark. Um,
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Well, it depends on the grocery store, but some of them down here in Florida do. Um,
Interesting.
so people will, slice them.
Hmm.
I think they use things like milk. They treat them in milk, and that sort of neutralizes a lot of the ammonia, well, the nitrogen. And then they're able to grill it, I guess,
Mm.
and eat it that way. I've never done it. I'm a vegetarian. I've never eaten a dead fish, so I don't know. But I think that's the way they've done it in the past. And apparently, black tip is okay. Black tip is good. Mako is good, but I certainly wouldn't want to do it.
Mako, you said. Isn't that means shark in a particular language, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that's also a Polynesian term for
Okay.
shark, right? Or mono is how they would do it.
Hmm.
But Mako is a specific kind of shark. It's related to white sharks. So when you think of
Mm.
white sharks, they look similar. They're these big oceanic fast sharks. But some people will eat those.
Yeah. I remember watching this one documentary about, some of the most deadly shark attacks in the world, and so many of them happen to take place in Australia. How much of your work has taken you to Australia?
I've been to Australia a few times on various research trips, and I think one of the problems that they have in Australia is that when they do get bitten, it's often by a big shark. And so here in Florida, we have this migration of thousands of these blacktip sharks. But the blacktip sharks, they're less than 2 meters long, right? They're human size. They're not really big things. And when they do bite, it's typically an inquisitive sort of bite and let go, but the mouth is like this big, right? And so you get all these little puncture wounds on your arm or your foot or something, but it's not that big a deal. All right. In Australia, when people get bitten, they tend to be by bigger sharks. They don't have this migration of thousands of black tips along the coast. They've got the white sharks, the tiger sharks, and so when someone gets bitten, It's a much more traumatic bite. Sure, the shark is still investigating with its mouth and going chomp, but now you've got a shark that's, 15 feet long and weighing 1,000 pounds plus. And when they go chomp, it's significantly more damage than a little black tip that's a third that length and, maybe not even a quarter of that mass. So I think that's the big difference down there is the sharks that are encountering. The humans tend to be the bigger sharks, and when they bite, yeah, there's a whole lot more tissue damage, and that's why people tend to maybe not survive as well.
Yeah. I wonder if sharks had any significance in Aboriginal culture. Yeah, it's something I'm not familiar with, but
You
that'd be
know,
an interesting
what
thing.
everywhere I go, I always try and get some local art by the native Aboriginals in the area depicting sharks. So in Australia, I have some paintings by some Aboriginal artists that have depicted sharks from their time. When I was in the Pacific Northwest, I have carvings from a Haida native over there who depicted sharks in their culture. In different places that I've gone, I've always tried to get some local art in Polynesia. I have examples of art from there as well. And so yeah, it's been something that has been a part of cultures around the world and how sharks are viewed and how sharks are depicted is often, I find, very interesting. Some of them are just I mean, like the totems on the totem poles, for example, in the Pacific Northwest. You see a very distinct shape. A lot of them are like salmon or orcas or something, but there's a very distinct shark totem, and it's part of their culture. Fishing was an important part of their culture. They're familiar with the species that they're catching, and they recognize that these sharks are one of the things in their environment. And so I think I've always found it interesting to collect this art from wherever I go to see how these sharks are depicted by the various cultures and how they view them. And typically what I found is the Aboriginal cultures have never feared them, have never had that same sense of distrust or fear. They're viewed more as this is part of our environment. And I think that's the healthier way to view them.
Because of my fascination, I often tend to bring up the conversation about sharks with family and friends. My family's from Pakistan, and I always ask them, "What do you call sharks in Urdu?" And there's not really a term, and
Hmm.
I'm not sure there's really any significance attributed to sharks in Pakistan or India. I'm not sure. What has your experience shown you? Do you know about
Sadly,
sharks in that area?
no, I don't. I wish I did. But I simply don't have that exposure, that experience. I can't comment. I know they catch them in fisheries and they're consumed for food. Um, but I don't know much more than that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it interests me. It baffles me actually. In Urdu, we have terms for crocodiles, but not sharks. It's like, huh? I wonder. I wonder. The most interesting term I've come across, though, for a shark is in Turkish. They say köpek balığı, which literally means dogfish. I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
how that came to be, but that's what they
Yeah.
call it, dogfish.
Well, that's a common term for a lot of these little sharks. They're called dogfish.
Mm.
In a variety of languages. I mean, even in English, we call them dogfish.
Huh.
Um, and so how that ever came to be, I don't know. But it's not unheard of to hear that dogfish phrase.
I'm familiar with the term dogfish, but I
Yeah.
always thought it was just a different kind of fish. But it even in English it just refers to a shark.
Yep. Even in
Wow.
English, it's a shark. Yeah.
Do you know the etymology of the term shark? Like when in English did we start calling it a shark?
Yeah. In the days of my youth, I knew that answer, but I I don't remember now. I think the shark is Old English from chark. I'm sure I'm not saying that right, but it's something that sounded like that. And I'm trying to remember what it meant. I think if, and I may be wrong on this, but it meant a dishonest person. A chark was
Hmm.
a dishonest person. Um,
Ah.
and so I'm wondering if that was correct or not. So don't quote me on that because I don't remember, but something in the back of my head comes up with that from years gone by that I read years ago.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah, there's so much to talk about when it comes to sharks, and you spent so many years exploring that, and I think that's awesome. Is there a particular film where you're like, this movie did a good job representing sharks?
Oh, that's hard. Most of the time, it's this was wrong on so many levels. That's that's much more
uh,
common. Um, in terms of influential, you have to, hands down, Jaws was by far the most influential movie to ever change people's opinions on sharks. Not for the better, but it changed their opinions.
yeah.
Because before that, never really thought of them much, right? It's, oh yeah, sharks are out there. That's about it. That movie really instilled terror in people who had never thought of sharks before. And in so doing, raised this whole generation of people who were afraid of the water, afraid of sharks
Mm,
in particular, and viewed sharks as the enemy. The only
mm,
good shark is a dead shark sort of thing. And they
mm,
wanted to get rid of them. And we are still recovering from that 50 years. This is 50 years post Jaws now. Um, and we are still literally recovering from that. Shark populations are literally starting to recover from that. It takes them so long. They have a long generation time. Um, and so it's not like a little fish that can, not like a tuna can reproduce like a million eggs a year. They're like crazy. But sharks have a long time to grow up to be mature. And then when they are mature, they only have a small number of offspring every year. So when you knock a shark population down, it takes a long time to build it back up. We're getting to the point where some species of sharks are starting to come back up.
mm,
And it's largely due to the fact that there was an increase in fishing, an increase in exploitation of sharks in the 1970s and 80s. And only now, thanks to management, have we gotten things tamped down a little bit so the populations can naturally rebound. So we're starting to get back to levels that we've had historically. But you know what's interesting is fishermen today will go out and say there's way more sharks now than I've ever seen before. And they'll say there's too many sharks now. What are we doing about all the sharks? And I have to remind them, well, it's not that there's too many. It's just that for your whole life, the numbers have been depressed. We're only
mm.
now getting back to the historic levels that we used to have. They got knocked down. They're coming back up again. And so it seems like there's more sharks, and there are more than you've ever seen, but we're still below what the historic levels are. So we're working our way back up. And I remind people that when you have a lot of sharks, it means it's a good sign. It means that the ecosystem is robust enough to support these top level predators. If you have a lot of top level predators, it means you have a lot of everything else down there to support it. And so when you see lots of sharks, view it as a good sign. It's not a bad thing. It's a good sign that things are okay. We're not totally wiped out yet.
Man, thank you for that. That was wonderful. And it was great how you mentioned, especially that part about how Jaws literally, influenced an entire generation. I never thought about that, but that's so true. I mean, art always has a hand in influencing, but that's something to think about. What it did to people avoiding the sea. A
Yeah,
dead shark is better than a live
yeah,
shark and stuff like that.
yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
that gets passed on, from parents to children. That fear of the water or that fear of the sharks,
Mm.
that's even subconsciously it's passed on to their kids. And so it gets perpetuated over generations. And so I think we're only now getting to the point where the information is being disseminated broadly enough that, you know what, we need these guys. They're out there, they're playing an important role in the ecosystem. We want lots of sharks. It's a good thing.
Yeah, and what I love about sharks, especially, there's a quote attributed to Brad Pitt where he said something like, "You just got to be the shark. You just got to keep swimming, keep going." Apparently, they don't rest, and if that's correct, that's awesome. Like they keep going at it,
Keep going.
keep
So
going. Yeah,
some, yeah, so some sharks do rest, but not all of them. Some of them will sit on the bottom and can still breathe just fine. Others have to continually swim in order to breathe because as they swim, they draw water into their mouth over their gills, and that's how they breathe. And so from the moment you're born until you die, you never stop moving, right? And so that's what he's referring to. Some of these just keep swimming their whole life, and it's nonstop. There's
have
no
to.
sleeping, there's no resting. You just keep going.
Wow. This has been great, Stephen. Thank you so much for your time. I was wondering, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you felt like you wanted to say you didn't get a chance to, or something on your
Uh,
mind that you wanted to express?
the only thing I would say is to any young people out there, if you're interested in something, pursue it. It doesn't matter if you have people who are skeptical that it's going to be the right career path for you. Do what you love because that's so important. You will be happier doing what you love than doing something that is prescribed for you if it's something that you're not particularly interested in. So I'm very fortunate that I had such a great upbringing and I could do what I wanted to do, and I'm loving every minute of it.
I can see that. The truth of that emanates from your face, the happiness of it. So thank you for that.
Great. All right. My pleasure. It's been so much fun chatting with you.
Yeah, likewise. Until next time, man. You
All
take
right.
care.
Sounds good, man. Thanks. Okay.
One last thing.
Yeah.
What does your last name mean? I was curious.
Oh, it's Japanese. Kajiura. The etymology is like a rudder on a boat and
Ah,
like bay, like an embayment. And so it's from I guess it's a fishing sort of name, So I mean maybe it's in my blood, this
perhaps it is.
Japanese guy from Canada who loved sharks for whatever reason, and his name meant, bay, steering into the bay. So for whatever that's worth,
Cool.
Kajiura.
Cool. Good to know.
All right.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Take care, Stephen.
Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.